So, how are you? Have they raided your house and dragged you
Oh
out
no, I mean,
kicking and
I
screaming?
have, I have absolutely, I have absolutely nothing to do with
You're
anything.
like, this is so ironic.
I mean, I have loudly been telling people don't get involved with this,
Yeah.
for obvious reasons, all week. Um, However, it's kind of interesting because I mean, anyone who followed the UK election from my side will know that I had some hopes for the Keir Starmer government to be, Tony Blair is back, the adults are back in the room, and so on. But unfortunately, there's a bit of internal politics within the Labour Party, and there are two radicals who are close to Starmer, very few people on this call will have heard of, called Sue Gray and Morgan
Hmm.
McSweeney, and they don't like Tony Blair, right? And so we all thought, well, the Dark Lord is behind Labour coming back, and he's got his huge NGO, and he's backseat driving the government. But what
Right.
happened is that as soon as Starmer got into power, they started basically snubbing Blair, like saying, "Oh, we're not going to do your digital ID." He's been going on about AI for weeks. There was a 1.3 billion pound AI deal that he had set up that was signed
So
under the
he's pro AI or what or
yeah
what? He wants to promote it and
yeah. I mean, essentially what Blair wants is technocratic global governance using
right.
AI, digital infrastructure, digital ID, and essentially a more massive surveillance state, which you'd think that the Starmer government might go for, but for whatever reason, they've decided that they're not going to do any of that, which suggests, if Blair's not getting his own way, that within the Labour Party, he and the centrists and the Blairites don't have control, and there is a more radical leftist element, a more, you may even say, woke element involved.
Hmm.
And I think that this probably informs Starmer's response to what's been going on in the UK, which frankly has just been atrocious. Now I understand, okay, yes, if the working class go nativist and start uh, you know, gathering outside mosques based on false information. I mean, all of us last week were like, this has all the hallmarks of an op. All of
A
the usual,
disinformation campaign. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
There's no.
disinformation, counter jihad involved. People like Tommy Robinson pushing it and so on. I mean,
Yeah.
anybody who's been around for any amount of time is like, okay, we're not going to touch this at all. Um, because I mean, I don't need to go into the connections of those people and where they are and what the network is and who they're connected to. Um, but all Keir Starmer needed to do really was to come out and say, and this is what Tony Blair would have done, which I talked about yesterday. He would have been like, listen, I hear you. Okay. I understand people are scared. Kids have been killed. Uh, I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna maintain law and order. I'm gonna keep everybody safe, right? And it doesn't matter who you are, which side you come from. If there's any violence, we're going to crack down on it. Keir Starmer hasn't done that. He has basically come out and declared war on the quote unquote far right, whatever that means, and has
Let me
very
jump in really
strongly,
quick.
yeah,
So,
go on, yeah.
what that message that you just said, now,
Mm-hmm.
absent the I hear you or I
Mm-hmm.
understand you, famously,
Yeah,
Charles de Gaulle said that to both sides of
yeah.
the imperial crisis. I
Mm-hmm.
understand you. And they're both like, oh, good. Um, I did hear the law and order reasonable message there. I even in his press conference, one journalist who I'm sure is some you know slimy liberal or whatever, he said, do you want to make an example of them? And
Mm-hmm.
Starmer said, no, we are going to apply the law forcefully and fairly. He said something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree it could have been better, but are you maybe overreacting,
No,
kind of
so
projecting a little bit onto him?
what Starmer did is that he gave two speeches. He gave one on Friday, which
Hmm.
was probably the one that you, and then he gave another one on Sunday. Okay, after the weekend, and things seemed to change between, let's say, the Friday and the Sunday, because a lot of the things
Hmm.
kicked off over the weekend. And I don't know how it happened, but the sorts of people who were involved, it's like, let's say the counter jihad were ginning this up. And, I mean, it's worth mentioning that uh, the initial stabbings were not done by a Muslim. They were done by uh, a boy who was born
Christian
in
from Rwanda. Yeah.
yeah, from Rwanda, born and brought up in Cardiff.
Yeah.
Um, and so the focus on Muslim communities and gathering outside the mosques and so on, it had, I mean, everybody was like, this doesn't pass the sniff test type thing. Um, but then somehow the um events over the course of the weekend seem to involve a lot more, how can I put this, like normal people, like get boomer waffen, just concerned locals, things like that.
Coming out
And
onto the streets.
yeah, and
Yeah.
there was also this strange thing that happened where the left also, I mean, there was a bunch of locations and dates that were posted online, many of them deleted now. Um, the left got a hold of that and also passed it around. Like it's pretty mainstream passing around of where they're going to be. And rather than saying like, okay, these are the locations that these people are going to be at, stay away from these areas if because they're coming. They instead decided, right, we're going to gather in those areas. We're going to form counter-protest mobs against, Birmingham is one of the places this happened. So I mean, it's almost like a perfect storm was set
Hmm.
up over the course of the weekend. And the trouble is that those counter protesters that gathered in all of those different areas, predominantly Muslim, came armed. They came armed with machetes and,
Yeah.
masks, and they were tooled up. And in this day and age, in the age of social media, obviously, people can just film what's happening. And so we have seen, the difference between the police going on. I mean, the police have gone after call them far right, call them native, whatever, but they've gone after the white working class protests with dogs. Like they've literally set the dogs on the crowd,
Hmm.
hammered them, they've gone for it. When it's the Muslim protesters, I mean, there was literally one clip going around saying, oh, listen, we're on your side. No, we're here to help type thing. Um, when they've also engaged in violence. And so
Sure.
what's happened, and then on Sunday he had another speech, and what he should have done after these had been widely circulated, and some of them had actually been on the mainstream media, i.e., Sky reporters, BBC journalists, and so on, actually went down to these areas where they said there were going to be these far right protests. In some of those cases, nobody was there, like nobody turned up at all, apart from
Hmm.
Muslims. And you literally got cases of journalists who are there with these masked guys with machetes behind them,
Oh yeah, I've
who,
seen some of those.
who are clearly Muslim, right?
And
And
they would
it's all
also
right.
cut the feed, which I thought was
Yeah,
the worst thing to do. And I'm not saying that in favor of salacious scenes of carnage. It seems like you need to keep to
yeah.
protect the journalist from these people. You should record it, in
So
fact. And yeah, go
yes.
on.
So what they did is they were like, all right, we have to cut straight back to the studio, and then other footage emerged of them like slashing tires, or various journalists have been like, listen, we went to these areas and we were chased out by Muslims and things like this. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and so that all of that had come out when Keir Starmer came out then on Sunday to give his speech, what he needed to do. is say, look, listen, this situation, we've got it under control. We're the government. We've got extra police on, etc., etc. Be sure everybody in all of these areas is safe, and regardless of who you are, do not go out there. Otherwise, you will face the full force of the law. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Again, he didn't. Again, he didn't do that. What he said was, um, the far right protesters have no legitimate concerns whatsoever. It doesn't matter why you're there. Okay. It doesn't matter what, like, the reasons that you're there. You don't have any legitimate concerns. And the Muslim community, we're with you. We're going to put on extra security for mosques, and we're going to keep your community safe. Now,
Yeah.
I understand. I understand the reasons he was saying that, right? But this is like basic political messaging, right? He even if it's implicit that he wants to keep everybody safe, he needed to come out and say it, because when he said it doesn't matter, a lot of normal people
Turned
heard,
on him. Yeah.
a lot of normal people heard, oh, you don't care about kids being killed? You don't care
Hmm.
about my community? You only care about them? And again, maybe he didn't mean that, but in terms of his basic messaging, it was so ham-fisted and so brittle and so one-sided that he's being dubbed by a lot of people now two-tier Kia, right? Because there's two-tier policing going on. And then yesterday they held this thing called Cobra, which is like a kind of
Hmm.
UK counterintelligence thing,
Hmm.
kind of intelligence, anti-terrorism. They always convene it in times like this where there's heightened risk and so on. And uh, coming out of that, they were like, okay, so we're concerned about disinformation on social media, obviously. But then they singled out Elon Musk, and they said, well, Elon Musk, and to be fair, Elon Musk did make a really stupid tweet where he said civil war is inevitable, okay, which I think was reckless and stupid thing for him to do. And I mean, I said on my show last night and last week that I prefer if these American slop accounts would stop kind of trying to make like content for conservative right-wing audiences to serve their narratives when, you know, real things are happening here. There's like
Yeah.
the real event that's happening in this country, and then there's the social media event. Okay, but unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which way you look at it, Keir Starmer has he's basically stepped into a kind of trap here, because rather than saying like, okay, we're going to talk about social media in the round, he singled out Elon Musk and he's picked almost a kind of WWE feud, like a kind of one-on-one feud, almost like people used to feud with Trump, if you remember,
Yeah.
with Elon Musk. So it's become Keir Starmer versus Elon Musk. Okay. Well, what Elon Musk has got 198 million people following him, and he is literally showing everybody the two-tier policing. And because Elon Musk says it, it then becomes an actual media story that the MSM report on. So now Sky News, Telegraph, like, well, every single newspaper has got a story with two-tier Kia in the headline. So I mean, in my view, this is a complete mishandling by the new, and don't forget the new Starmer government, even though they got a big landslide, they got a very small number of total votes. So they don't have, like, they were coming in, if you want, without a really popular mandate, without kind of legitimacy, if that makes any sense. So
Hmm.
he's going down a road of escalating rather than calming things down. And he's picking these fights that I'm not entirely sure that he can win. Like,
Hmm.
they're talking about using extra legal powers now and extraditing people. But like, what are they going to extradite Elon Musk? What are they going to do? I mean, the entire ruling class, Richard, is addicted to Twitter. The
Hmm.
Westminster ruling class. What, he's going to ban it? I mean, I just don't know
Yeah.
what. Like, I'm not sure if the British
They're going
state,
to
if the British,
extradite Elon Musk from the United States to the UK to stand trial for misinformation.
it,
Um,
yeah. So
I agree with you. I mean, it does seem like a sort of shit lib tactic to get in these mono feuds with some right wing person, and a better centrist tactic would be to discuss the real issue of disinformation on social media. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, whether Musk is facilitating this is an interesting question, or whether that is him, Musk personally, or whether Musk, often his tweets just strike me as a coming from a 14-year-old on
Mhm.
4chan. The civil war is inevitable. I mean, this is dumb. I mean, I don't know what to say. So why is he tweeting that? Does he? Why does Elon Musk go after this audience of people who can't vote Republican or don't vote, and who certainly aren't purchasing Teslas? Why does he play to that callow, immature, idiot group of people? Why? Is it just
Mhm.
he's an idiot? I mean,
I,
I don't know.
I have noticed that there is a kind of method in his madness, though. There is a
Uh-huh.
discernible pattern of which particular slop accounts get boosted. Okay, and
The
in fact,
Israeli ones.
yeah, I mapped them a couple of weeks ago. It's
Okay,
libs of
interesting.
it's libs of TikTok, End
Right.
Wokeness, Ian Chung
Yes.
Lee.
Okay, Ian Chong is
Yeah, I
obviously
mean
a
he's
weird
he's a kind
Malaysian,
of
but
slight
pro-Israel.
outlier, but
Yeah, Libs of
uh
TikTok is an Orthodox Jew. End Wokeness might very well be Jack Posobiec. That's the kind
yeah,
of rumor. Who's some extremely strange figure who, again, the connection to Russia and Israel is not so much with Libs of TikTok, but with the other ones, really holds true. It's just
there,
very concerning. I mean, what is going on?
there's a few other ones even more high profile as well. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, obviously everybody saw him take the trip to Auschwitz with Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson is someone he kind of promotes. So is Tommy Robinson. And
Jordan
I
Peterson
noticed,
had Tommy Robinson on the Daily Wire like 2 weeks ago as well.
yeah,
As
and
a network.
that had what 2 million plus, almost three
Sure.
million views or whatever.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's clearly what we call the counter jihad, who are, I saw Katie Hopkins was one of the people who, shared the list of venues and things like this. So I mean, it's obvious. Anyone who pays attention
Yeah.
can tell the network at play. Um,
Yeah.
the thing is that in 2024, whether we like it or not, that network is pretty powerful now, right? I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
it's become powerful, and
Yes.
I wonder if it is sufficiently powerful to basically take on the British state in the way that they're trying to do. I don't actually know what options Keir Starmer has when it comes to taking that down, because he's very quickly going to come across like, well, these are all in America and they're protected
Yeah.
by American law. And I mean, I don't know what, I mean, they're not going to shut Twitter down in the UK because that would seem ridiculous. And his own his own base who are addicted to Twitter would quickly be like, oh shit, what we're going to do now? We don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, don't forget, Joe Biden decided he wasn't going to run, and he announced it on Twitter. So there's
Yes.
just like no way. So this is in a way a new problem um, for the ruling class. I would have likened it in a way to um, in the 19th century when the industrialists became a kind of new elite and the old aristocracy. Like, how the hell are we going to deal with this? Because and initially they were like, we're going to have to fight them, but I don't know. I mean, I think that's the real story of Musk, the PayPal mafia. I noticed even Mark Zuckerberg won't endorse Kamala Harris now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and there's even a bit of, I mentioned that Tony Blair is on the out, seems to not be in with this, in as far as we thought with this new government. There's even a bit where he is connected because his backers are Bill Gates and Larry Ellison of Oracle, his major backers, but he's also connected with Google and people like that. And
Hmm.
you know, if you have a look at what Elon Musk and people like Peter Thiel and so on, the actual kind of world they want to build is pretty much the same as the one Tony Blair wants to build. You know, I mean, Elon Musk has talked about digital ID before. They've all talked about AI as the future. Um, so, I mean, I've got a theory that if Blair represents anybody in the current, in the current environment, he represents the interests of big tech essentially. And I mean, everybody thought, well, big tech has been captured by by the old establishment. I'm not sure about the extent to which that is true anymore, because it really does feel like a lot of the money that's going for Trump,
Yeah.
is coming from big tech. And I think that's because Trump is, as long as he gets to brand it with his own stuff, right? I think Trump won't have any problems going along with any of that stuff. It's going to be the Trump AI, or it'll be the Trump digital ID. As long as he can stick his brand on it, his followers will
Sure.
cheer him on, and he'll get less pushback, or those guys will get less pushback from a figure like Trump, who at the end of the day is non-ideological, pragmatic, than they will from these people who have basically 20th century socialist instincts like Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's kind of where I am with my current view on what's behind a lot of this. Now I will say it, as things stand today, it looks like Starmer is massively losing his feud with Elon Musk. There was a YouGov poll that showed that about half of the population think that Starmer's handled the riots badly. Only 31% think he's handling it well.
Hmm.
Um, the huge caveat I want to give everybody here is that a big raft of protests are planned tomorrow, Wednesday. It's currently Tuesday,
Hmm.
and the resolution of this story won't come until we know what happens after that, basically. So there's still scenarios where, and again, this is why I always tell people, don't go to protest, don't get involved or anything like this, because the level of chaos and unknowns is so huge. And after Jan 6, after Charlottesville, and all these sorts of things, it kind of boggles my mind that people still want to get involved in these things, young men and so on. Um, and it's like, okay, there's a chance that Starmer continues to play it so badly, and like, let's say there's a scenario where some of those Muslim mobs that he basically has tacitly empowered do something terrible tomorrow. Okay, it could end up with a narrative win, but you know as well as I do that so many other things could go wrong, and it could end up with a
Oh.
devastating loss. It's like
Oh, yeah.
rolling
I
a
mean,
die. It's like rolling a dice and hoping you get a six. You can get 1 to 5.
yeah, yeah. Rolling a loaded dice, a die is probably the better metaphor. Yeah. I mean, they were lighting a hotel on fire that was housing migrants, and I assume that was not successful. That people are only going to be arrested for arson. But imagine all of these people being arrested for murder, mass murder. I mean, this is so
Mm-hmm.
beyond. This is beyond J6. Even it's well beyond Charlottesville.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple of. So I'm interested in a number of things here. I'm interested in the networks and what they want. Like, what does Peter Thiel want? Peter Thiel is, founder of Palantir, that is no doubt being used to arrest the people doing this. Peter Thiel
Mm-hmm.
seems to also have a network of people who are promoting it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very weird caduceus or kind of dialectical thing of arresting the people that you're inciting or funding. Is bizarre when you think
Mm-hmm.
about it. I'm interested also in the geopolitics of it, but before that, just in terms of the people actually taking part in these protests, Starmer called them far right thugs, but my impression is that they're non ideological trolls. I'm not sure. I mean, they're far right, maybe in some vague sense, but it really is a lumpen prole group of people whose concerns are totally understandable. They don't like what's happening. They just simply don't like these migrants. And they can talk about Islam all they want, but it's about race and color and just attitude and lifestyle, whatever. They just don't like them. And I get it. That's fair. But I don't think it's my impression is that it's non-ideological. It's a kind of spasmodic revolt against people you hate, and just something sets it off. There's the little match thrown into the bale of hay, and it just all goes up.
Mhm.
But I mean, is that a correct impression? I mean,
It,
I don't. How ideological are they really?
I, I think there's a couple of things to say here. The first thing is that one of the effects of both the media and what we call the slop accounts are massively putting this on everybody's timelines, or and Starmer's reaction as well, is that the scale and extent of all of this is probably somewhat overblown. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you know, from tweets like, "Oh, civil war is inevitable," and
Right.
from the impression of your timeline or the front pages of the newspapers, you'd think the country was up in flames. Okay,
Yeah.
um, that is not really true. I mean, a lot like I know people who like live in some of the areas where this happened, and they were like, "I was out on Saturday night and nobody was around, nothing was happening," you
Interesting.
know. Um, and so there is talk that, the total number of people involved in this may be as small as like 1,000, like all in,
Wow.
i.e.
Yeah.
there's not really many people involved at all, but it's
Yeah.
been blown up. Okay, so that's one thing. And
Because
this
we
is the
live
difficult,
on social media. Social
yeah,
media is your reality.
yeah,
And
and this is the
so,
difficult, yeah, this
yeah,
is the
go ahead.
difficulty though, because there's the real actual thing that's happening on the ground. And there's the virtual event
Mm-hmm.
that's
Right.
happening on a kind of symbolic level.
Right.
And you see, I mean, I think one of the mistakes Keir Starmer has done, or the British state has done in general, is they've leaned into that virtual world. They've leaned into the virtuality of it and made it into, and now it's become almost this pro wrestling event where it's just like,
Mm.
oh, it's Team Starmer versus Team Musk or whatever.
Right.
Whereas in previous times, I mean, this is one of the things that um, is often forgotten, I think, is that in the history of this country, the lumpen proles, as you call them, or the white working
Mm-hmm.
class, have a very long history of having these sporadic riots, right? They
Yeah.
did it under Thatcher. They did it, and I mean, there were constant riots all from the Second World War until Thatcher. Often there was unions involved back then, but right back into the 19th century, there were, especially at the summer when it's hot, when the temperature gets high, the
Sure.
you get these, if even going back before then, you had peasant revolts every once in a while and things like that. So the white working class do riot occasionally, okay? And the British state, is pretty adept at dealing with these things. Um, but usually what they do is they kind of localize it, they make it small, and they kind of say, oh, listen, the situation's under control. They
Mm-hmm.
don't go, this is 24/7 ticker tape national emergency, which is what Keir Starmer has done. Um,
Yeah.
and so in a strange way, they're making it into this huge thing. But
Mm.
Starmer's stance has almost been like, it's almost like he's like goad, like I don't want to say he's goading, but it's like rather than saying, calm down everyone, this isn't that big a deal, right? Just go back to work or whatever. He's coming out almost with a kind of fighting stance. It's like saying, come on, have a go if you really want to. And I just don't think that that is the way to deal with crisis. Okay. This is another element of this story, which is that initially because this uh, chap from Rwanda, Cardiff, because the killer was not first of all, he is not yet 18 years of age, so they didn't name him, which is standard under British law. Um, but because it was just kind of an act of violence, it was treated as a normal crime. It wasn't treated under terrorism. Okay. And so
Isn't that
the
appropriate though? I mean,
right,
that
well,
mass stabbing at a ballet studio, wasn't that what happened?
yeah, yes,
This sounds like someone suffering from schizophrenia or
but the
just serious mental illness.
the consequence
That's
of
my
it being the consequence of it being treated as a normal crime, though, meant that the
hmm
usual crisis response management unit that comes from the terrorism unit um, didn't kick in. So, for
right.
example, if you remember the Ariana Grande concert that happened in Manchester, where there was, children killed, because that was chalked up as terrorism, the the response unit quickly came in, and it was like,
Yeah.
oh, we're all going to come together, look back in anger, we're going to light the candles, we're going to talk to the parents, and all of that kind of nudge unit stuff kicks in, and whether people love that stuff or hate that stuff, it helps to calm everything down and it keeps it contained. That didn't
Yeah.
happen this time. And so the narrative very quickly got away from the authorities and the situation escalated. Um, so, I mean, it's a mess. It really is a mess. And because it's happened so quickly into the new Labour government, I don't really know what's going to happen here. We're kind of off the map. I honestly don't know how things are going to play out. And it does feel like, I mean, it didn't need to be this way. If the crisis management was better, this story could have been over and would have been talking about something else. But
I agree with everything you say, but I feel like you're not, I mean, it could have been handled better. There's no question about it. But it does seem like you still need to blame the people spreading the misinformation. It's
mhm,
it kind of like with J6, where it's like, well, they did this wrong and they should have been aware that this was going to happen beforehand. But it seems to be kind of deflecting or avoiding the issue, which is these people mob ransacked the Capitol. It seems like you should be more antagonistic towards the people pushing this. I will give
mhm,
a pass to the proletariat because I get it. In fact, they're probably suffering from all sorts of things, financial stuff, chaos in the family, all sorts of stuff. I'll give all of them a pass, in fact. But I'm not going to give a pass to the people spreading this information for whatever
mhm,
reason, whether it's merely to create chaos, to weaken, the West or NATO or whatever. There's this kind of element there. Whether it's to get people hyped up about Muslims, 2001 style, because of October 7th and some impending conflict with Iran or whatever. I mean, I think you have to go after them. And the other thing is what I've seen from non-slop accounts from the
mhm,
dissident right is also maybe not quite as bad as all that, but it's concerning, and it maybe gives us a glimpse into the psyche of these people. So a lot of people, they all hate me, so I don't have any problem calling them out. They hate me kind of irrationally, but whatever.
mhm.
They don't seem to hate you, so maybe you'll be a little bit more hesitant. But this notion that, like, I saw some, like, Martyr Maid really hates me, although I've never met him. I find him kind of fascinating. I'm kind of curious about him, but this notion that, like, the grand Evolian force of tradition has emerged and is asserting itself, or like, you have a right to do this because of some anthropology study that I've done, like a survive the jive type stuff. I find it odd, and there's a sort of there's two things. There's a sort of romanticism, but I think there's something deeper. There's a libido for the stupid. Um,
Hmm.
Mencken, H.L. Mencken wrote a very famous essay called Libido for the Ugly, where he was bashing like American Midwest architecture. It's just like it, his point was like you could have like you almost actively chose the uglier option. Like, it's almost like you had a will to ugliness in, in building these houses. Why, like, there's something wrong with you? It's a very funny essay. I haven't read it in a while, but there's a kind of libido for the stupid that I find among the right, where the same people, whatever you want to say about Charlottesville, like if you have criticisms, or you more generally have criticisms of Charlottesville, I'll probably agree with a lot of them. And I'm certainly more than willing to discuss this in a kind of complicated and gray, fashion. Charlottesville, at the end of the day, was a permitted rally about a political issue, and an immediate concern. It had an end goal, etc. It descended into chaos and disastrous in many ways. I don't want to go into it right now, but it's a real thing. All of the same people who attack Charlottesville as this, like, Fed operation, or everyone should have known, or Spencer was evil and led them into it. All these things that I've heard a million times over and over and over again. These same people who say that all the time will wax romantic about, I'm just going to be honest with you, thugs with 80 IQs like smashing and grabbing at pharmacies and burning down a hotel where you could quite plausibly murder not only the refugees but some poor janitor who's earning a basic wage overnight. That somehow they waxed romantic over something that is just obviously stupid, to be frank, and obviously can never really accomplish anything.
Hmm.
Like you don't take over the country through rioting. I mean, I don't know what to say. I have sympathy. As I said, I give all of the proles a pass because they're not too bright and they're suffering. So I give them a pass on this, even though they might need to be disciplined a little bit, but I'm not going to judge them morally. But I do judge morally people with 115 IQs who, like, think that the avatar of Evola has risen from his grave and is, the one actually protesting on the streets, and they're taking back tradition. I can't even with these people. And those intelligent dissident right accounts are just as culpable in my mind as Ian Miles Chong or Jack Posobiec or whatever, who might very well be getting, and Tommy Robinson, who might very well be being paid to be evil. They're probably not being paid to be evil. They just have a libido for the stupid. That's my criticism. Do you can
Yeah, I mean,
respond, or if you're
I mean, well, I
or
mean,
not.
I mean, I don't know about some of the specific people you mentioned there. I mean, Martin, I only really know him for his geopolitical takes. I don't really,
Yeah,
but I've had a number of run-ins with several people who have been calling me a coward and a kind of, you never want to do anything, and all this sort of stuff.
right.
And I mean, I agree with you that this is kind of in Kuwait, kind of, you know, senseless violence in many cases. And I'm
Yeah,
also not convinced, and I've said many times, the people you should direct your anger at, if you're angry, are the people who are responsible for this, who are not Muslims who, you know, were following their own incentives. Okay. I
yeah,
mean, many of the people who have been targeted have not had nothing to do with any of this. And from their side, they're going to rightly feel, be like, oh, hold on a second, we were just minding our own business, and now we're involved in a race war here, you know. So I kind of agree with that part.
Yeah,
I'm also kind of, I mean, yeah, some of the people on the ground are going to be locals. Some of the people, I mean, there is a kind of undercurrent hooligan culture thing that's always existed here, where there are guys who just like a fight,
yeah,
and they go
sure.
around looking for trouble, basically. So that they will, I don't know how many of them there are involved with this, but people like that will be around. And there are also people who clearly have, I mean, there's some level of planning. Otherwise, where have these dates come from? Where have the locations come from?
Hmm.
How has it got to some of these big accounts who've been sharing them? I mean, I do think there's a number of things going on. Um, and, you know, um, I agree. I mean, the idea that someone like Evola would be supporting like lumpen pro violence is ridiculous. I mean, the most elitist man to probably live in the past 100 years was for
Right.
this. I mean, he's got a book somewhere called A Handbook for Right-Wing Youth, where I mean, you know, to the extent that he supported anything like that, he literally said like, "Oh, you probably need to live in a commune and learn discipline for the, you know, for 10 years before you're ready to do something like this, because otherwise, like you say, it's just kind of
Yeah.
directionless. I mean,
And
there's
it
this.
was very different with Hitler. I've been reading this book. There's a new book that came out. I'm forgetting the author actually at the time. I'd never heard of him before. It's called Takeover. The description of 1932 through 1933, the kind of 6 months to a year of the National Socialists taking power, and it's a totally mainstream account, but it goes into a lot of detail. And there was a tremendous amount of thuggery, and there was a tremendous amount of uh, disinformation, you could say. One famous case, there was actually a guy who was about to throw a grenade at communists, and the grenade went off and in his hand, and he was blown to pieces. And the Goebbels blamed it on communists. They're like, you can just throw a grenade at a random pacifier. So they're just kind of overtly lying. And then when the truth comes out, they're like, oh, I guess you're taking the side of foreign Bolsheviks as opposed to good-hearted Germans. You know, the same type of rhetoric you see. The difference is that, first off, the judiciary and a lot of the establishment were sympathetic towards Hitler. Even if, like Hindenburg, they sort of hated Hitler and thought he was a ruffian, there's a sort of sympathy that the current elite does not have for these actors. Secondly, you also should not underestimate the level of organization that was involved with the National Socialist Party. They had headquarters, they had tens of thousands of members, they had ideologues, they had multiple papers that were all centralized in effect, even though they had different um, views on matter. They, at the end of the day, seized power through Hitler's appointment as chancellor. You don't, so there was a lot of, you know, to grant the other side a point, there was a lot of roughness and stupidity and just senseless violence, murdering of there was one case of murdering a young man that became salacious. It was just senseless. They got drunk and they went out and shot this guy. I mean, it just indefensible. But that was within an organized structure. I feel like the big difference is there's no there's no legitimate way for any of these people to take power. And they're organized and surrounded by either figures like Farage and UKIP or Reform or even the Tories, I guess to some extent, that want, as Enoch Powell correctly noted, they want to benefit from the chaos without ever solving the chaos or doing anything about it or having any real coherent vision. Or they're surrounded by a pro Russia account that wants to create chaos in the West for reasons. Just stir the pot, see what happens. There's no goal outside of chaos. Putin can facilitate a refugee crisis, which he has done, and then he can, give loans or play footsie under the table with far right parties. He's creating the problem and the response, and it's just this endless cycle. They're surrounded by that. They're surrounded by Israeli sympathetic people like Tommy Robinson or outright Israeli agents who want to get people all ginned up with hatred against Muslims so that they'll take Israel's side in an impending, or America's side in an impending war against Iran. So it's like there's no way out of it. And I think this is maybe a big problem of people organizing on the basis of social media.
Mhm.
That there's no, like, the 20th century methods of a party and some sort of hierarchy and organization in the real world where you had to get on the telephone or write letters to people or meet them face to face. And I'm not saying that's going to work, and I'm not saying that National Socialism worked at the end of the day, and I'm not going to say that we should repeat that, but there is at least a way forward. Whereas this, like, incoherent, inchoate, I guess, kind of emerging right or something that's all organized on social media, it just, there's no direction. It doesn't have a place to go. It doesn't have any, and it can so easily be channeled by bad actors that it just, I don't want to sound just needlessly depressed or blackpilled, but I just look at it all and I'm just kind of like, this is for the birds.
Yeah, to some of your points there. I mean, this is a point I made in the populist delusion as well. The discipline of the National Socialists, even by the mid 1920s, was said to be at military level. And let's not forget,
Yeah.
those men were World War One veterans, all of them,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
they actually came in with military level organization. Nothing even approaching. I mean, not even 1% of that. I mean, I was arguing with this guy on Twitter called Zoomer Historian. He's a young guy. He does a bit of revisionist history on YouTube and so on. He's got a pretty
Oh,
big,
I think I
pretty
know.
big. He's got a pretty big YouTube account.
Yeah.
But he's a young man and he's got kind of romance in his eyes and so on. And
Yeah. There's
he was
Zoomer
really,
theologian as well. These
yeah,
Zoomers do all these
he was
Zoomer
really. I mean,
stuff. It's
he
funny.
really came in on me and was calling me like a traitor and a coward and so on. And I said, like,
Right.
listen. I said, listen. The British working class had organized unions at a national level where they could pull general strikes. Okay. Um, the British state still managed to absolutely smash them over the course of the 70s and over Thatcher. Absolutely smash them. Okay. We do, like, when I say the people who are currently out there now don't even have 1% of that level of organization. Not even 1% of it. It is literally random groups of people who don't know. I mean, if you went down to one of these places, they don't even know the people they're with. Like, who is this person I'm marching next to here? What do they stand for? Why do they want me here? Like these sorts of at
This is
least
the
back
alt
in.
right problem.
Yeah,
This is the alt right
and
problem. It's a bunch of avatars that come out into the real world. You have no earthly idea who anyone is. They demand to have authority based on their internet clout or something. It's just bizarre.
you also
Go
have a
on.
really weird. There's also a really weird scenario though, right? Because in this country, this is a really serious situation that is escalating as we speak. Okay, even if most of it is virtual, as that could become kinetic, especially in the next day or so. And
Yeah.
already there's been, property damage and police cars burnt and people feel unsafe and so on. But yet, in the middle of this, you've got genteel Jordan Peterson weighing in with, oh, look at the totalitarian state of Britain,
Yeah. Yeah.
thought crimes in a
Right.
Stalinist Britain and all of this sort of thing.
The
So
Muslims, they suffer from pathological narcissism, and but
so there is yeah.
he's ultimately urging it on though in his just dumbass or pseudo intellectual way. Yeah.
But this is a very strange dynamic because
Yeah.
if you think about it, the people who are kind of egging this on most are also the people who within the kind of online ecosystem, if you want to put it that way, are also amongst seen as the most milk toast, the libs of TikTok, the Jordan Petersons, Elon Musk, and it's
Yes.
like, do any of these people kind of realize what they're playing with here, or what is happening, or how dangerous the situation is? So it's a very strange. I mean, Adam Curtis called it hypernormalization, right?
Hmm.
And we are living in this kind of
Interesting.
very strange scenario where it's like, we're off the map, and I don't know where it goes. And I also don't, for the first time in my memory, I also don't know if we can fully back the British state to come out necessarily on the winning side here, because I mean, there's a real question as to whether Starmer has basically overpromised what he's able to deliver by
Hmm.
escalating it in this way. I mean, he's actually talked about a standing army of police that he's put on.
Yeah.
They have opened courts now to run 24 hours a day to super speed process through the thugs who are caught doing this stuff. And he said he's going to go after social media. The thing is if they keep on escalating the scale, I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, the Labour government released 20,000 prisoners, saying that the prison system is so overloaded that there's literally just not room. So they
Yeah.
let 20,000 people out. Well, in those circumstances where the police is underfunded, where there's, they're laying on 6,000 officers for tomorrow, across or extra 6,000 extra officers tomorrow across 30 different locations. Well, if this situation has escalated because the government has failed to calm it down, or they have actually ginned things up by responding in the way that they've done, and it's being ginned up by all of the slop accounts, and all the rest of it, we're in a situation where, you know, if the aim of certain foreign actors is destabilization, they got it.